Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on where you are and when you are listening to this. And so today we're going to be discussing the dark side of the adult entertainment industry. And that little piece of music that you heard just in the intro there, that was a small stem or snippet from my new cover of Betty Davis Eyes by Kim Kearns. A very popular song from the 1980s, and my next musical release shall be a cover of that song, a song I like greatly and I know is very popular amongst people. So stay tuned for that. And so we're just going to get right into it. The dark side of adult entertainment. Now, to preface this, I am not against pornography or adult entertainment or people doing it. I just think that people, if they want to do it, should be protected and not exploited and safe from predatory people, and if people want to do it, they shouldn't have their boundaries pushed. They should be protected, and they should have their rights respected. There should be no coercion and no predatory behavior from managers, directors, or other performers. I believe that firmly, and so I don't look down on performers. I don't want to shame performers. I want to shame uh, parasitical agents and producers and directors and heads of production companies who really are the evil ones in the industry. And I think a lot of the performers are victims. And of course, there are people that have done it and that have not been taken advantage of and have a positive view on it. And that's what I would like for everybody who does it. But sadly, the reality is a lot of people get abused, manipulated, and suffer physical and psychological injuries that stay with them for the rest of their lives. So that's what we're trying to shine a light on today. And I hope you'll join us and enjoy in the conversation with all this. So let's get right into it. Um, Human trafficking and compromised consent. Performers frequently enter the industry due to severe financial desperation, homelessness, or predatory grooming. And as a result of this, they're very vulnerable to contract traps where production agencies often use legal grey areas and aggressive contracts to force performers, especially new performers, into acts that they would initially refuse to do. And that is coercion, and that goes against consent. If that you've got a young performer desperate for money, desperate, to be able to feed themselves and have a job. And then you have these predatory production heads who use all forms of coercion, manipulation, and pressure to break these people's boundaries down. And I don't see that as consensual. I see that as predatory grooming and as assault. Hi, Diva Girl. Glad you could join us. And glad you're here. And I hope you enjoy the new background that we have. It's quite occulty stroke witchy, you know what I mean? And I thought it needed a change from the all blue. So I hope you enjoy it. And that's what as I was saying. The production agencies they are uh, basically coercing and compromising people's consent and free will by breaking down their spirits and tying them into these predatory contracts where they feel so controlled, the performers, and feel so indebted and unable to get out of it, that they will, like I said, they will do things that they would never want to do. For fear of upsetting their bosses or losing their money, and these people get the performers into a state of mind where they feel that this is all they can ever do. So that is predatory. This is all very predatory, and no one can say it isn't. Um, I like the background, just my style. Yeah, perfect. Glad you enjoy it. I thought that a lot of my viewers would enjoy it too. We like the kind of the witchy stroke occult style gothic theme here. I still consider myself to be a goth, even though I don't like and my hair isn't dyed anymore, and I wear a lot more sports shirts than I do all black, but I still like to put on the black every now and then. But yeah, I digress. And also, a lot of adult entertainment utilizes and uses human trafficking networks. So, international cam networks and low budget productions heavily rely on victims of human trafficking, particularly victims who come from economically deprived backgrounds or foreign countries. And they use that women who or men who may not be in the country legally, these predatory production companies basically own them. They have nowhere to turn to. They're not supposed to be in the country legally. They don't feel like they can go to the authorities, and that's what these evil predators, these parasites, do. And my sympathies and my heart are with the people who have been trafficked and who don't feel like they have anywhere to go. And if anyone like that's listening to this, know that you actually do, that there are charities and there are authorities that you can go to, and you have rights. You know what I mean? Even if you're in the country illegally, you're being trafficked, you have rights. You know what I mean? So please, if you know anyone like that's listening to this, go to authorities, go to charities. People do care about you, even if it may not seem like it. And and that's just a horrible thing. And it's, you know, these women and men who are trafficked from the third world countries, or really economically deprived backgrounds. These are the people that, you know, they get the most abusive treatment, you know, the most degradation, because there's no one, seemingly no one, in their eyes or in the eyes of the production companies who will actually do anything about it. And to me, it's just it's a modern day form of slavery, and it's abhorrent. It's I'm repulsed by it, by the research I've done. I never knew uh, the industry can be this evil and unregulated. And yeah, that's what and this brings me on, like, there needs to be clear regulation, and there needs to be unions for performers, that, and people in those unions that will advocate for them and prevent predatory production companies. So if there are still production companies doing it, which there always will be, unless we ban it outright, which I don't think is great either, really, because it'll just force it underground. So, and then the treatment would get even worse. So, you know, if there's going to be production companies, they have to be heavily vetted and regulated. There has to be clear oversight from government and from law, and there has to be unions for performers, and these unions, you know, have to go to bat for these people to prevent this. And this is what I believe. And also mandatory. I'll get onto this later, but I think it should be mandatory, if there's any kind of pornography where sex is going on, where a condom has to always be used. I firmly believe that. I think if you're going to commercially show this, I think a condom should always have to be used, because the danger of this is it can promote to the young people that, oh, you don't have to always wear a condom, because as we'll get into later, as we'll get into right now, there's a high I thought later, yeah, but right now, high STD rates. So, like, actually, historically, only 17% of actual heterosexual sex scenes in adult entertainment actually involve the use of a condom. So you've got young people who are impressionable, watching pornography as they do, sadly, um, and not knowing that, you know, this isn't realistic at all. And they go, right, okay, so 17% of them are only wearing condoms. Right, I won't wear a condom. And then, you know, teenage pregnancies, STDs, God knows what. That's what this is creating. And it's not just creating it by influencing the young people and people alike to not wear protection, but also the performers themselves. You know, there's high STD and AIDS rates amongst performers. And it ain't just homosexual performers that have to worry about it. Anyone can contract AIDS, you know, and HIV. And if anything, it seems like the heterosexual performers are more at risk of getting STDs based on my own research and into the statistics of all this. And it is, it is quite an alarming thing, the amount of sexual partners that all these performers have. You're gonna have there's major outbreaks of STDs and AIDS. You know what I mean? And it's really worrying, and obviously there's ways that people can treat this now, but nobody wants to get an STD or AIDS. You know what I mean? It's not. I don't. By any of my research, it's clear that it's not pleasant to live with these things and the stigma attached to it all. So yeah, I think mandatory use of condoms is a must. I think for adult entertainment is a must. I think because for safety, for safety, and if you don't, it sends a terrible message. Sends a terrible message, I think, and as well, there can be severe physical injuries, not just not STDs and AIDS. Physical injuries it can involve nerve damage, severe nerve damage. It can involve pelvic floor dysfunction and chronic incontinence. Do they not have reliable STD testing? They do. They're encouraged to do it, but based on what I've heard from a lot of ex-performers, that it's a bit of a joke, really. That a lot of people, a lot of them sadly don't take it as seriously as they should. So I think with unions and I think with more regulation, mandated STD testing and mandated contraceptives is a must. I think, and a female performer. I don't have a name off the top of my head, but she sadly took her own life after receiving shame and backlash because she refused to do a scene with a man who regularly shoots scenes with men and women and doesn't wear a condom. So she was like, because of that, I don't feel comfortable, doing a scene with you. And and I also want an STD test from you as well, and I want you to wear a condom. And that's all she asked for him. And because of that, she was vilified and she was blacklisted, and she eventually, because of the abuse, she was getting labeled a homophobe. All this crazy shit just because she wanted safe sex, which is her right, and everybody's right. She was vilified, and it resulted in her taking her own life. And that I think there needs to be a major wake up in that industry for the realities of all this, and how it simply can't go on like that anymore. And that she was in no way in the wrong for demanding safe sex. She was in the right. And as well, forced performance is a sad thing and a real thing. Industry insiders report that the show must go on is certainly the mentality of many production heads and directors, meaning that performers are frequently pressured to shoot scenes while visibly injured, heavily drugged, or actively crying. So, there's, like what I say, coercive control, that sexual assault, that's horrific, and it's really sad. And this isn't just in the low budget gonzo amateurish world of adult entertainment. This happens at the highest level, where women and men are drugged, heavily drugged, and already visibly injured or actively crying, and then they said, oh, but you've got this contract, give them some coke and that'll pep them up. You know what I mean? And that's the mentality, and that's evil. That's really evil. It's disgusting. It's parasitical, and it's really bad. And there's also the mental and the social repercussions. There's a permanent digital footprint created by adult entertainment. Content uploaded to the internet is near impossible to delete, and high-profile ex-performers routinely get their requests to remove content rejected, and they barely have a leg to stand on legally as well, which I think is wrong also. And identity-based abuse. Content is frequently leaked, re-uploaded without consent, or tied to a person's real-life identity by trolls to prevent them from gaining outside or non-adult entertainment related, or should I say, alternative employment. And I personally believe that these trolls that do this are, paid for by production heads to force actors or actresses, performers who are trying to get out of the industry back into it. And that's another sad reality. And I don't think that allegation that I'm making is too far fetched. And parasitical managers is another thing, as I've already touched on. And with the rise of independent platforms like OnlyFans, which actually, in theory, are good and really good, and I think are beneficial because they remove the middleman or the middlewoman, the need for a middleman or a middlewoman, and that's what I think. It means that performers can perform and their boundaries aren't being violated. They can set their own terms and set the price for their content, and they can actually make the money from their content. And it isn't, the money itself isn't made by these production heads or site owners. It's made by the individual, which I'm very much in favor of. And but sadly, with that, there is the downside of parasitical managers are still trying to latch onto performers, claiming that you need a manager to manage your scenes, career, whatever, finances, and essentially these managers steal money from the clients and control their very lives, and act basically like a pimp. And that's the reality of it. People like Andrew Tate, and the Tate brothers, and many others. That's what these guys do. They're parasites. They take over the lives of these young women, and and if these women want to make that content, they should be the ones making the money from it, not these guys. They're the ones that are putting the work in for the labor, and it's just another form of slavery again. Good point. Middleman can be where boundaries are crossed and people may be exploited or abused. Exactly. That's where the coercion comes in. That's where the predatory contracts come in. If someone wants to do OnlyFans on their own, they can walk away at any time. They can set their boundaries. They can set their price. There's nobody there unless, that they, sadly, some people can, draw the attention of these predatory managers. But if they're able to keep away from them, they can avoid the real negative side. Of course, there's going to be negative sides. Like if you want to move away from it, as this happens, people, trolls, whatever, take your content, re-upload it, send it to bosses, family members, whatever, and that is obviously sad, and really traumatic. But and it shouldn't happen. But like I said, that's a lot less severe than some of the things that happen when it's production company, and there's the middleman, like you say, that's where boundaries can be crossed and consent can be blurred, which is something we really don't want. And here's like a recommendations for anybody watching now or the replay, some media to check out. There's The Dark Side of Porn, which is a Channel 4 documentary from the UK. It's a British documentary investigating the gonzo production environments and the exploitation of the underground markets. Now, gonzo pornography is usually the more controversial types of pornography, and usually these scenes involve, in theory, simulated sexual assault, rape fantasies, kidnapping, things like that, and other taboo uh, themes. And obviously, they say, "Oh well, it's all acting, it's all consented." When there's coercion involved, it really is sexual assault. So a lot of these gonzo productions, as they're known, they really are in effect illegal, because although they claim they're acting out, a fake scene of rape. A lot of women who have been in these productions and men have later claimed, that yeah, I actually was sexually assaulted, and so as a result of that, that it really is uh, what it's, trying to market itself as. It's trying to operate in a grey area and get past illegalities that openly blatant sexual assault, sexual abuse material would be, and it caters to particularly depraved and evil individuals. And also, there's the OnlyFans inside the machine, which was on the BBC Channel 3. And it's an expose on parasitical managers of OnlyFans, so like Andrew Tate, the Tates, and like what we were talking about earlier. And then there's the actual movie, feature film, a movie called Pleasure. And it's a movie that provides an accurate, unflinching look at the toxic power dynamics and the treatment of novice performers in LA's adult entertainment scene. So that I certainly recommend that, and I recommend the movies about Linda Lovelace. Obviously, there was the one in like 2013. It had James Franco and Amanda Seyfried, is it in it? And there was one earlier as well, which I don't think was as good. But that is a nice transition. Well, not nice, but a transition to our next, topic, which is Linda Lovelace, and that's where we will be heading now. Linda Lovelace. Some of you may already know who she is, but if you don't, she was born Linda Borman, and she starred in the world's first like mainstream adult movie that garnered mass public attention, and that was called Deep Throat, as quite a few of you may know. However, Borman was forced to do this movie along with the other way more depraved scenes and films that she'd done, some of which involved bestiality. She was forced to do this by her then husband Chuck Trainer, and Trainer would beat Linda and would literally pull guns to her head to make her do these scenes. And Trainer would pimp her out to people who would beat her up black and blue, and he'd take the money. And this was all for the money for Chuck Trainer's cocaine addiction. And he also used cocaine to control Linda also. And Linda shows visible bruises in all of the scenes that she shot in her adult entertainment career, showing her allegations to be highly credible. Linda asserts that she was raped in every scene that she did, and as a result, that the scenes that she's done, including Deep Throat, should be illegal to view and own. And I 100% agree with that. It isn't up to the production companies. It isn't up to the managers. It isn't up to another performer to determine if a performer consented or if a person consented. It's up to that person. And if that person says, I didn't consent to that, I was coerced, I believe them, and that this content shouldn't be shown anywhere. And if you have it, where the performer's claiming that they were a victim, you should be arrested, because that's an abomination. Having a video of someone's assault and gaining pleasure from it, I think that's a perversion. I think that's a crime, and I think anyone doing that should be put in jail. Should be put in prison for a long time. Should get some psychological counselling as well to figure out why they like that stuff. Because once people, people who commit sexual assaults, a lot of them, they say that they started with an addiction to pornography and adult entertainment that glorified these types of attitudes towards people. These notions that force is okay spreads, and it's dangerous. And serial killers like Bundy said that, and also the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, They both were like this. You know, they were obsessed with violent, sadistic, and cruel pornography. And it got to the point where just looking at it and fantasy wasn't enough. They actually wanted to go out and do it. And that's why, you know, and as well, you know, profiteering of someone's abuse is an abomination anyway. But there are many reasons why we need to, you know, get rid of content where there is coercion or allegations of coercion. And Linda, yeah, and also later in life, Linda became the spokeswoman for Women Against Pornography, and allied with radical feminists radical feminists who think that pornography is bondage of women. You know, whereas I take the view that it certainly a lot of it is pornography can, you know, or adult entertainment can be done in a way to where the chances of abuse of the performer or manipulation or you know, corruption or of a performer, exploitation of a performer can be minimal. And I believe in that. I think people are always going to do it, and I think if they're going to do it, it needs to be safe and regulated and on their own terms and no coercion. So I part ways with the radical feminists on that, but I accept that they mean well. You know what I mean? But I think an important thing that I think radical feminists should recognize is, you know, believing in women's rights is like believing in a woman's right to choose things that, you know, that these radical feminists may not, you know, like, you know what I mean? And a lot of these radical feminists would, you know, look down on would think that a woman being a housewife and raising children isn't as important or meaningful as a, you know, a career driven 9 to 5 woman. Totally reject that, you know what I mean? So I am in no way a radical feminist, but certainly there are large aspects of, I think, more moderate feminism that I strongly agree with. You know, I believe that women should have the same opportunities and rights as men. You know, I don't think gender really should should mean anything in terms of the way people are treated, you know, and what they can do, what they can't do, you know. So that's what I believe. And yeah, as well there's as well we'll get to another performer, and the performer who is obviously, or ex-performer, the ex-performer who is in the thumbnail of the video, and I have her picture in the corner, and I think that's Mia Khalifa. And Mia Khalifa is probably the ex-performer who I have resonated with her story and what she does now the most. I think that Mia is very brave and is a very, very intelligent woman. And I think that what she's doing in her advocacy and awareness is amazing, and it takes a lot of confidence. And you know, she's calling out you know, heads of productions and certain things, and for the treatment that she's faced, and also uh, you know, she has advocacy work. She supports peace in the Middle East. She stands up for Lebanon, which is, you know, her ancestral home. I'm not sure if she was born in Lebanon, but her family is certainly from Lebanon, and Mia very close to her Lebanese roots, and yeah, she advocates for peace in the Middle East and for awareness for everything that's going on over there, you know, and she's faced a lot of backlash for it, and she's a heroine of mine, you know, a female hero, and I certainly look up to her. Hi, Amber. Glad you could join us. And thank you so much for making it. And for everyone who is watching live or on the replay, Amber, ATS News, will be live later today. in a couple of hours, and she'll be talking about the Mackenzie Shirley case that we've covered here. So if you want you want your Kenzie fix, head on over to ATS News after this, and you can have it. Amber's a great creator and is a great modern friend of the channel, and it's always fun in her chats. And I will hopefully be there too if I am not too tired later on. And I'll certainly make an appearance and say hi. How long I am able to stay up is up for debate. You know, I have a rugby game in the morning to get to, so can't be up too late. Although I'd love to, my body just won't let me. I'd just collapse on the field. You know, if I don't get a good night's sleep. You know, and Mia Khalifa, who, as I was, given a bit of a background of, she claimed to have only made $12,000 for her only 1 year of work in the adult entertainment industry, and Mia was a victim of an extortionate and abusive contract that removed her legal rights to her own image, name, and likeness for the time period for the year that she was doing adult entertainment. So any content of her, any images of her from that time, and her name from that time. Uh, she doesn't own the likeness to. These production heads can still manipulate it, re-upload it, and profit from it, and Mia doesn't get a penny. You know what I mean? She has absolutely no rights over it, and that's horrific. And Mia has also warned about the danger of virality, and she warns young people that just because you go viral, doesn't equate to wealth. You know, and she said, like as previously stated, Mia only made 12 grand for her year of working in adult entertainment. She could have worked at Walmart for a year and made more money. Or she could have worked as a server at a restaurant and made more money. And I think she would have made quite a lot in the tips. Um, you know, and yeah, she would have made. She could have made a lot more money doing a job that would have caused a lot less trauma. And that's her message to young people. You know that. They're sold this lie that that it's instant fame, instant money, instant this, instant that, and that there is money to be made, but only for the top people, like in music as well. I'm in music. I don't make loads and loads of money. I do well. I do well for most, but it's only the top 1% of anything really that are raking in the big bucks, and that's the lesson that she's trying to teach the young people in her advocacy. And she's a top class woman, great woman, and I would love to interview her one day. Probably will never happen, but I think it would be a good a good sit down interview, or a good over the stream interview. And I know that's quite out of reach. I was trying to get another ex-adult entertainer and former escort, Scarlett Hampton, on, but I emailed her, but she didn't get back to me, and she doesn't surprise me though. She probably gets spammed with emails all the time. So I understand, Scarlett, if you're listening. You just do you. You know what I mean? You didn't let me down. And there's always, other times I could have her on. And yeah, I've chatted with Scarlett before in, like I've mentioned, Aaron Imholt's Steel Toes Live, Steel Toe Morning Show, friend of mine, and she was in the live chat there on YouTube back when he was doing his YouTube show. He's moved to Rumble now, Aaron has. But yeah, back when he was doing YouTube, Scarlett would come in chat. She was a fan of Steel Toe as well, and I got talking with Scarlett, kind of about the adult entertainment industry in the chat, and about her experiences with it. And she's a very interesting and very strong woman. You know what I mean? And very well educated. And like I said, I'd still love to get her on to discuss her experiences, and her journey, and reclaiming her self-worth and independence. So that is another possibility that we may still be able to get Scarlett on, or perhaps somebody else. You know what I mean? There's a few other ex performers that I reached out to, and one did get back to me, but she just couldn't do it because she's working in the strawberry fields, which is what her current job is now. She picks strawberries, which is a seems like a very nice bit of work to do, very picturesque, but very grueling. Manual, you know what I mean, in the heat, you know what I mean? It's not easy, not for the faint of heart. So maybe we could get her on, and who knows, you know what I mean? Because this is a topic I don't just want to leave behind. This is what I want to keep discussing. Like, and as well, there's a lot of topics that I like to continue to revisit on the channel, and I'll be revisiting missing Native American women soon because there's been sadly some more missing Native American girls, women that I need to cover. I think because they're not getting the media attention, the mainstream media attention that they ought to get. Yeah, I'm happy to. Not happy that I have to, but more than willing to raise awareness for that for their plight. And back to Mia though, Mia also mentioned the coercion of her filming her infamous hijab scene where she was, doing sex acts dressed in a hijab, and obviously because of her Muslim faith and Muslim background, she found this like deeply offensive and was very hesitant to do it, but she was deeply pressured and manipulated into doing it by the production, and the fact that she'd signed such a predatory contract, she felt trapped and unable to really refuse. And this was very traumatic for her. And it went viral throughout the world, especially throughout the Muslim world. And as sadly you may be able to expect, groups like ISIS sent her, very specific death threats, and she still gets death threats today because of that scene. And she needs security, and she still doesn't feel safe. Threats of beheadings, threats of all sorts. From people who, if they really thought about it, would see that Mia was a victim. That Mia didn't want to do that. That Mia's just as repulsed by it as they are. That the evil people, the people who did wrong, were the production heads, the people running that, who were clearly had anti-Muslim, anti-Islamic sentiment, and wanted to, degenerate and debase the image of a Muslim woman, and that's motivated out of hate and bigotry. And that's what it is. And that's what it's rooted in. And she knows that. And she's been calling that out. And that's just repulsive to me. And it angers me. And it angers me that she's getting the death threats when she's the victim here. You know what I mean? She didn't want to do that. And but sadly, I think in the Islamic extremist culture, these people don't have very much sympathy for women, especially women who are victims of abuse or assault. So yeah, me asking these guys in ISIS and whatever to have any kind of sympathy for a woman seems like a bit of a stretch. As we've said before, the extreme ends of these Abrahamic faiths, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, the extreme ends of these faiths don't think very highly of women, and that's just the bottom line. And it's really sad, that Mia and so many others like Linda and God knows how many others adult entertainers and performers have to go through this and have to go through abuse and essentially slavery to a degree, and all the mental and physical health problems. And then once they get out of it, they're the ones that are demonized. And the public, the media, society, They love to demonize sex workers. They love to demonize escorts. They love to demonize adult entertainers. They don't love to demonize the producers. They don't love to demonize the managers. They don't love to demonize the people who are creating these predatory environments and scenes. No, they like to blame the victims. The society loves to blame the victims, for God's sake. It's what we've been doing for thousands of years. You know what I mean? It's only been recently where people have been starting to question all that. And that's what it is. You know, the vitriol, the dehumanization that sex workers of all kinds face, it creates violence against them. It creates murder against them. Rex Huberman, God knows how, Peter Sutcliffe, God knows how many other murderers that targeted sex workers, knowing that society thinks less of them, knowing that the police and the authorities wouldn't care about them as much. And they're right. And that's the sad reality. And we've got to examine our society and our culture and ask why we do that to these people who have already been through so much. Why are we so sadistic? Why are we so cruel to people who are victims of abuse and coercion and grooming? And even if they aren't, you know what I mean? Even if it's someone wanting to do it on their own free will and isn't being abused or predatory, that's their right. Everybody has sex, mostly. Everybody thinks about sex, and everyone has a sexual component in their life. It's in our DNA, you know what I mean? It's who we are, and people have been, paying for sex or paying for things related to sex since time immemorial. You know, so to stigmatize something that is a part of who we are is absurd. But what isn't a part of who we are or who we need to be or who we should be is the predatory size of it. You know, and that's the element that we should be judging, not the performers, but the people who are inciting these predatory scenes, these uh, you know dangerous scenes, these abusive scenes. That's the people who deserve the vitriol. That's the people who deserve the condemnation and the shame. Adult entertainers deserve understanding, empathy, and help if they need it. You know what I mean? And dignity. You know what I mean? I truly believe that, and I believe as a society we need to get beyond the shaming culture. We need to get beyond this. You're defined by this, you're defined by that type of stuff. You know what I mean? People should be free to reinvent themselves as they see fit. You know what I mean? And not have to be shamed for something that, they shouldn't be shamed about. You know what I mean? These were people who were coerced at a young age or by desperate situations, and not just in the adult entertainment industry, but in escorting and in pictorials like Playboy and all this kind of stuff. Young women would watch say shows like The Cat House. Dennis Hoff, who used to run the Bunny Ranch in Nevada, like one of the few legal brothels in America that was fully regulated, and the HBO did a show about them, and that would before The Sopranos. So you'd watch or after The Sopranos, I can't remember, but like you'd watch The Sopranos, watch Tony, and then later you're watching Dennis Hoff at his bunny ranch with all of his escorts that he has working there. And there's a documentary that I watched recently about the dark side of the bunny ranch, where a lot of the women who were working there, said that Dennis would, force himself on them and, basically treat them like property, and that he would, his whole line of, oh, don't do drugs in my house type of thing was all a load of bollocks, that he set up Lamar Odom when Lamar Odom was found there, and that Lamar Odom was plied with, drink and drugs and allowed to basically dig himself into a huge hole. And Dennis Hoff was insistent to the women that we keep Lamar Odom there, whatever the cost, as long as possible. Because the longer he's here, the more money he spends. The more money he spends, the richer that we all get. When in reality, Dennis, it was a 50-50 split in the Bunny Ranch. So Dennis was getting 50-50, for simply just providing a room and a location for them to do it, when the women, they could have done it out of their own apartments, you know what I mean, or what have you. And also they'd have to pay for supplies like condoms, sex toys, what have you. And, so then really it wasn't 50-50, it was more like 70-30. You know what I mean? And real exploitation. And in that documentary, some of the girls, the women who were interviewed, said they ended up going to the Bunny Ranch thinking it was like some sorority where all the women got along and that you were valued and treated right. And they got there and they realized, it really wasn't that, where the women, they would beat up the other women out of the new girls would always get beaten up by the more established women there to assert their dominance, and also to keep them down, and also to, I think, condition them to control and domination. And I think that was at the ordering of Dennis himself, and several of the women who were there, like I said earlier, were reported to have been forced upon by him. And it's the same kind of story with Hugh Hefner, where women watched The Girls Next Door and thought, "Wow, Playboy is great, and Hugh seems like a really nice guy," and all that. And while some women, had positive experiences with him, some didn't. You know what I mean? But people can be different things to different people. And but at the end of the day, I don't think very highly of Hefner, like the way you spoke to Holly and Holly Madison, and made her, feel, self-conscious about her body and crap like that, when Holly is, like a very, she's a model, you know what I mean? She's a very stunning woman. And for him, as an old guy, to be like, "Oh, you're gaining a few pounds or whatever," like, fuck him. And like all the other stuff, like we've talked about in the live, where like the way he was with Sandra Theodore and some other stuff. Yeah, he's a bit of I think Hef was a scumbag, but he could kiss ass and be nice when he needed to, and which is why there's such a varied um, picture of him from ex playmates and play bunnies. But that's the point, though. That's back to it. Like the adult entertainment industry, the sex industry, the pictorial, industry, whatever. In all of its forms, modeling industry as well. We've mentioned Les Wexner on here from Victoria's Secret and his ties to Epstein. So all these worlds are intertwined. And what is the common theme is that they are represented as being something that they really aren't. You know what I mean? Or something that they usually aren't. When you to lure in naive young people, and that's what these industries rely on. They rely on people who are down on their luck. They rely on people who are naive. They rely on people with low self-esteem who don't think they can do anything else. They rely on people who've already been victimized as children, so have a lower self-worth and are predisposed to being victimized and passed around and used and abused. And that's the sad, dark reality of this industry, and as I said, like I keep saying, I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. It can be done. I don't want it to be banned outright, but I just want it to be heavily controlled and regulated, so as best to prevent abuse, manipulation, assaults, coercion, spread of STDs, whatever, as possible. You know what I mean? I want these people to be safe. I want the performers to be safe, healthy, and as happy as they can be, because they have that right. Everybody has that right to be able to do their job and not be abused, taken advantage of, and get a fair wage and fair treatment. That's exactly what I believe in. And that's what I'm saying, and it's a shame that I even have to say these things, you know what I mean, that we even have to be having this conversation. But ex-adult entertainers, or even entertainers and people who are still in the business, raising awareness about the dark sides of it and educating people. If they really want to do it, going in with their eyes wide open instead of eyes wide shut. You know what I mean? Which is what a lot of them sadly do. And this is what I'm saying. And I think that is exactly how this stuff needs to be handled. You have to have informed consent when you've got a girl, just turned 18, fresh off the plane in LA. She's green, you know what I mean? She's a novice. She doesn't know the ins and outs of the industry, you know what I mean? She doesn't know how it really is, you know what I mean? Like she's going in with a very skewed perspective of it. And she's ripe for manipulation, coercion, and abuse. And we don't want that. We don't want that. We don't want people to be victimized. We want people, if they're going to do something, they're doing it because they know what they're doing. They know what's expected of them, and they want to do it. You know what I mean? They're not. They don't get there, and then they're manipulated, and then their boundaries keep getting pushed and pushed and broken and broken and broken. We can't have that. That has to be called out for what it is. Coercion and abuse and illegal, a crime. You know what I mean? A total crime, and that's what I'm calling for. Heavy regulation of this industry, heavy regulation of all of it. And I believe that sex work and escorting should be legal um, in America completely. You know what I mean? It always will happen, escorting, and but what you do is when you criminalize it, you force it underground, and you make trafficking a lot more inevitable, and you make victimization a lot more inevitable. But when sex work, whether it be, adult entertainment, escorting, whatever, when it's regulated and it's controlled in the right way, it can, be, a an industry like any other, but the adult entertainment industry and sex work in general is ripe for it to be manipulated and used and taken advantage of uh, by people with predatory intent. And what I'm saying is we need to set more guardrails there, set more guardrails so that these people are not as able to do that. And that's what I want to be the main takeaway of all this, that sex workers are people too, and they deserve rights just like everybody else does. And I'm glad you like that, Amber. Oh yeah, AJ, have a great show, man. I'll watch on repeat. Sorry I couldn't get Scarlett on. Oh yeah, no worries, Nasty Meal. I'm glad you reached out and you tried, and I really appreciate that. And yeah, I like I said, I sent her an email myself as well, and I don't know if she still uses that email account, but yeah, uh, yeah. I appreciate your effort, and thank you for stopping by and catching the replay later on. And yeah, I'm very happy with the way that this live's come out. And as I was saying, sex workers are people, with rights, and they deserve dignity and respect. They don't deserve to be objectified, you know what I mean? And they shouldn't be defined by their job, and they deserve to be able to work and do their job without being abused, coerced, taken advantage of, and get a fair wage for the job that they're doing. You know what I mean? And get medical care. You know what I mean? There's a lot of, these even the top end um, performers are oftentimes not covered for mental, not mental, for medical insurance. But I think mental health uh, counselling should always, should be provided as well. I think these big production companies, if they're going to exist, they should provide. They should, provide, healthcare insurance, which extends to obviously not just physical health, but mental health also, so that if performers want counselling, want therapy, that they can get it. You know what I mean? And that they don't have to jump through a bunch of hurdles. So I want, you know, these reforms in the industry to be implemented, and I'll. This is a cause that I'm very passionate about, and I'm willing to go to bat for, and I'm willing to make noise about as well. And so I will be writing to various representatives, uh, email, whatever, in the United States, asking for an inquiry, maybe a congressional inquiry into the adult entertainment industry, and also into the fact that keeping prostitution, escorting illegal, on a federal level, it does more harm than good. It actually creates more trafficking than it would prevent. And this is what I'm going to do. I want to write to, you know, bipartisan political figures, you know, Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, what have you, and try and raise some awareness about this, and also write to people in, you know, Britain and Ireland as well, and all the other countries that I have ties to, and influence, really influence, but friends in, you know, and that's my aim, and I'm more than willing to do that, because I think that there's so many issues attached, and I have a lot of sympathy for adult entertainers and sex workers in general, as a lot of them are victims of childhood sexual abuse, and I know that, and it breaks my heart that a lot of that some of them, you know, they've been abused and their self-worth's been taken, you know, down so low, and then maybe they've developed substance abuse problems to try and block out the trauma, and then, you know, they've got a substance abuse problem, and they've got severe, you know, trauma from childhood that they're having to deal with every day, and they don't feel able to work a 9 to 5. So then they think, well, it's the only thing I can do. It's the only thing I was ever of any use for, you know, and that just makes me sad. You know what I mean? It really does. And I have a lot of empathy for all the people in that, and I always will. And thank you for everyone for joining. And you know, I wish the chat was a little bit more interactive and we could have gotten some more people here, but hopefully this will do better on the replay. I'm not surprised, to be honest with you, though, because YouTube probably isn't pushing this too hard, because they don't like discussions about sex, or raising awareness about, you know, exploitation or anything like that. Which, you know, it's making my departure from here to Rumble even more inevitable, because I want to talk about real things. I don't want to talk about nonsense. I don't want to lean in towards the Kramer type content that they seem to want me to do, and YouTube seems to want from us in the true crime community. Not that I'm against Kramer, I just think for me to, it's not my type of content I ever want to make. I like to do, you know, social issues, true crime mixed with social issues here. And I like to, you know, be mellow and be jokey as well, to give it some levity. But I like to be serious, you know what I mean? And I like to talk about things uncensored and say the proper words for things. I'm a grown man, for Christ's sake. I'm not. I don't like. I don't want to say self deletion. I don't want to say essay or graped. It's stupid. I want to say. I'm saying that's an insult to the victims of these kinds of things. It's a bloody insult, and I don't want to keep having to do this type of thing where I'm having to censor myself on things that I shouldn't have to censor myself on. So yeah, it makes my departure to Rumble even more inevitable. But thank you everyone who stuck with us, and thank you everyone who's watched the replay. Please comment down below, share your thoughts, your views on the live and the topics, and any ideas for upcoming lives or subjects you'd like me to cover. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be uh, technically true crime. You know what I mean? Like social issues, whatever. I'm up to covering a lot of different things. You know, and thank you everyone. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. And last thing before I go, and I'll probably end up having to do that outro again because I usually do it right at the end. But as for future content, I'll be doing a live soon about Jeffrey Donaldson, the former Irish politician who has been recently convicted of SA, and I'll be doing a live about his case and about the corruption and the cover up and all the other crap to do with it, because it's quite a deep and dark case that involves MI5 and high like level political corruption, and use potentially MI5 having used knowledge of Jeffrey Donaldson's proclivities for abuse to manipulate him politically. So this is a very big bombshell, and I'm certainly going to be covering that in the coming days. So probably around Monday I'll be live again, so you won't have to wait another week for me to do another live. I'll be live Monday about Jeffrey Donaldson, and that's my next live. And obviously, as I said at the start, I've got a new song coming out, which will be my cover of Betty Davis Eyes. You heard a little snippet of that at the start, so that in full will be out in the coming days also. And stay tuned for that and look out for that. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.